The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was vast, its walls curved like the inside of a colossal pearl. Above, light shimmered in slow waves as if the ceiling held an ocean instead of air. Thousands of alien eyes, some glowing, some blinking sideways, some unblinking at all, were fixed on one figure in the center of the chamber. Captain Elias Ward stood with his hands bound in silver cuffs, chains running down to the floor. His black hair was messy, his uniform torn at the shoulder, but his eyes were steady. On a small pedestal above him, the presiding judge, a tall being with skin like glass and veins of light, read out the charge in a deep, ringing voice. Captain Elias Ward of Earth, you are accused of insulting the galaxy. You are accused of words that have sparked unrest in 12 systems, ignited riots on 7 worlds, and challenged the authority of this council. How do you plead? The hall was silent. From every corner, recording drones floated in place, broadcasting the trial to billions across the galaxy. This was not just a legal case. This was a spectacle. Most expected the human to beg. Others hoped he would apologize, admit his error, and save his planet from punishment. But Elias, he smiled. A murmur ran through the crowd. In the viewing galleries, alien diplomats leaned forward. In the far back row, a thin, bird-like creature clicked its beak in disbelief. You have nothing to say? The judge pressed, his voice echoing like thunder across the chamber. Elias tilted his head, his voice calm. I will speak, but not to plead. The judge's eyes narrowed, a faint glow flaring inside his crystalline skull. Very well. You will explain your actions to this council and the galaxy before your sentence is given. As the court guard stepped back, Elias let his mind wander for a moment. Back to the place where all of this had started. It had been 3 weeks earlier at the Peace Summit on Thaloris Prime. The hall there had been even grander, filled with hundreds of alien leaders, their robes glittering with jewels and metals. Earth had been given a single seat at the far edge of the circular table. A reminder that humanity was the newest member of the council, and, in the eyes of many, the least important. A debate had been raging about Earth's colonies on the edge of the frontier. Several powerful species wanted those territories placed under shared protection, which was a polite way of saying they would take control. Humans had objected, but their voices were drowned in the council's arguments, until Elias stood. The room had gone still as the only human in the chamber stepped into the center. You want to protect our colonies, he had said, but what you mean is to own them. And that will never happen. Not while we draw breath. He could still see the way every alien face turned toward him. The translator drones had repeated his words in 100 tongues, and each time they sounded sharper. We will never kneel to anyone, he had added, his voice steady. That was the moment the chaos began. Back in the trial chamber, Elias's lips curved at the memory. They had dragged him away from the summit before he could say more, the council guards gripping his arms like iron. Now here he was, on trial for 7 words. The judge spoke again. Do you understand, human, that those words are seen as a declaration of rebellion? As a challenge to the authority of the galaxy? Elias looked up, meeting the judge's glowing gaze without fear. I understand exactly what they mean. In the crowd, a ripple of whispers spread. Some aliens frowned, their faces tight with anger. Others looked almost curious. The judge's gavel, a sphere of compressed light, struck the air, sending a deep hum through the hall. Then explain yourself. Tell the galaxy why you spoke such words. Elias took a slow breath. The moment stretched, the silence pressing in like a heavy cloak. Because, he said at last, there are things more important than fear. The words hung in the air. Up in the balconies, a small reptilian envoy leaned closer to his aide. He's not just defending himself, he whispered. He's making history. The judge's eyes flared again. Speak, human. The galaxy is listening. And so, with the chain still heavy on his wrists, Elias began to tell the story, not just of his words, but of the truth behind them, a truth that, if heard by the wrong ears, could shake the very order of the stars. The council chamber dissolved in Elias Ward's mind as he spoke, his voice carrying him back to that day on Thaloris Prime. The memory was sharp, every detail clear. The glint of alien metals, the smell of strange incense, the low hum of translator drones hovering in the air. The room had been round with tiered seats that rose like an amphitheater, each filled with alien dignitaries draped in their culture's finest. Banners hung from the ceiling, glowing faintly with their homeworld crests. Earth's seat had been far to the edge, almost as if it were an afterthought. Elias had sat quietly at first, watching the endless debate. The topic was dressed in soft words, but everyone knew its true meaning. The shared protection of Earth's outer colonies was nothing but a grab for power. One after another, council members spoke about efficiency, unity, and reducing human burden. In their mouths, the words tasted sweet, but in their tone, they were sharp as knives. A representative from the Jathari, tall, insect-like beings with jeweled chitin, had leaned forward, its voice clicking through the translator. Humans are new to the stars, inexperienced. A guiding hand will protect them from themselves. That was when Elias had risen, not abruptly, not with a shout, but with the kind of deliberate movement that made people notice. His boot. It's echoed against the crystal floor as he stepped into the center ring. 100 alien eyes, multifaceted, luminous, or strangely pupilless, turned toward him. You speak as though our people are children, Elias began. His voice was steady, almost calm, but the air around him seemed to sharpen. You speak of protection, but I hear control. A murmur ran through the chamber, tails twitching, feathers ruffling, antennae stiffening. Some of the elders on the council shifted uncomfortably. Earth will not hand over her colonies, Elias continued. Not for your safety, not for your guidance, and not for your profit. He paused, letting the translator drones repeat the words in 100 alien languages. Each translation seemed to make the air heavier. Then he said it. The 7 words that would echo across the stars. We will never kneel to anyone. It was not shouted. It was not delivered with anger. It was spoken like a promise and a warning. The chamber froze. Some alien dignitaries stiffened as though struck. Others hissed, clicked, or growled. The Jathari representative recoiled as if he had been personally attacked. In the upper tiers, a cluster of delegates began speaking rapidly into comlinks, their voices tense. The insult was not in the tone. It was in the meaning. To say such words here, in the very heart of the council, was to declare that humanity would not be tamed. In a galaxy built on hierarchy and order, where every species knew its place, this was like throwing a torch into a room full of dry paper. A high-pitched chime cut through the air, the signal for immediate disruption. Guards in silver armor marched into the ring, their polished boots striking the floor in unison. They surrounded Elias, their weapons humming faintly. Captain Ward, you are in violation of council protocol, one guard announced, his voice stripped of emotion by his helmet's filter. Elias did not resist as they gripped his arms. He only looked up at the tiers of alien faces watching him. You asked for our truth, he said, his voice carrying. I gave it to you. As they dragged him from the chamber, his words still hung in the air, repeated endlessly by translator drones to the audience beyond the walls. Outside the council hall, in the crowded streets of Thaloris Prime, alien civilians began to murmur. Many scoffed. Many cursed humanity's arrogance. But somewhere in the chaos, small voices whispered something dangerous. Voices from species long crushed under the council's order. The humans are not afraid. Back in the present, standing in the trial chamber, Elias's eyes swept across the crowd. He could see the same mix of expressions here. Outrage, disgust, curiosity, and something else. Hope. The judge leaned forward, his crystalline features catching the light. So, human, it is true. You admit to speaking these words before the council? Elias met his gaze. I do, and I will not take them back. A deep murmur rolled through the chamber like a far-off storm. Somewhere in the galleries, an alien with scales the color of iron smiled faintly. The judge's voice was cold. Then we must decide whether such defiance can be allowed to live. and with that, the trial moved into dangerous waters. The council chamber's air felt heavier now, as though the walls themselves had absorbed Elias's words and were holding their breath. The judge's cold declarations still echoed, but Elias's mind was elsewhere, listening. In the silence between official voices, there were other sounds, faint murmurs, the rustle of robes, the low, secretive clicks and hisses of aliens speaking in codes meant to be unnoticed. They weren't meant for him, but years in the fleet had taught Elias how to read a room, and this one wasn't united. He caught the briefest glance from the upper gallery. A reptilian alien, its scales a deep iron gray, looked straight at him before, lowering its head. Another, a small bird-like delegate with eyes like molten gold, kept glancing toward the guards' positions. And then he heard it, faint but clear, coming from somewhere behind him. Two voices, speaking in the guttural tones of the Dravery species. "He's right," one whispered. "They will never kneel. Maybe. Neither should we." The moment was gone in an instant, swallowed by the judge's gavel humming in the air. "The council will hear witnesses," the judge announced. "Representatives of member worlds may speak their views on humanity's conduct before we decide their fate." This was not mercy. This was theater. Each testimony was another blade to be driven into Earth's back. The first speaker was from the Orlathi, tall, willowy beings with translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but her words cut like steel. "Humans are dangerous. Their defiance spreads unrest. Already lesser systems talk of rejecting council directives. If we do not make an example of Captain Ward, chaos will follow." The crowd murmured in agreement. Then came a delegate from the Torvax Empire, his heavy frame barely fitting into the speaking platform. His deep, rumbling voice filled the hall. "The humans insulted every world in this chamber, but they also spoke a truth many fear to say aloud." The judge's crystalline features shifted faintly. "Delegate Torvax, is that a defense?" The Torvax leaned forward. "It is a warning. Crush them, and you will make them martyrs." Gasps and growls rippled through the hall. Elias didn't move, but inside he recognized the first crack in the council's unity. The testimonies continued, some venomous, some hesitant, and a few that were almost sympathetic. And then, without warning, the lights in the chamber flickered. Not the steady dimming of an official pause, but a sharp, une, then flutter. In that instant, Elias felt something slip into the chain around his wrists, a tiny, flat piece of metal no larger than his fingernail. He kept his face still, his eyes fixed forward, but his fingers closed around it. From the corner of his eye, he caught the faintest movement in the crowd. The iron-scaled reptilian delegate had leaned back in his seat, hands folded as if nothing had happened. Before Elias could process the gesture, the light steadied again and the judge called for order. "The testimonies are concluded. The council will recess to consider the charges." Guards moved toward Elias, their boots striking the floor in unison. But now, the chains on his wrists felt different. As they led him away through the side corridors, the small metal device pressed against his skin like a promise. He didn't know yet who in this galaxy wanted him free, but he knew one thing. The council was no longer united, and that made them vulnerable. The guards escorted Elias through a dim corridor lined with smooth, dark stone that seemed to absorb sound. The trial chamber's noise faded behind him until there was only the steady rhythm of armored footsteps. The air smelled faintly metallic, like the taste of blood. They stopped before a sealed door. One guard pressed his palm to a panel, and the door slid open with a hiss. The room inside was small, a holding chamber with no windows, no furniture except a single low bench, and walls that pulsed faintly with the same biolight as the council's core systems. When the guards left, the silence wrapped around him like a shroud. Elias sat, letting the metal device hidden in his palm rest against his leg. It wasn't a weapon. Too small for that. Maybe a key. Maybe a signal beacon. Either way, it meant someone out there wasn't ready to let him hang. The door opened again. Not a guard this time, but a tall figure draped in deep green robes stepped in. Her skin was pale gold, her eyes ringed with faint lines of bioluminescence. Elias recognized her. Counselor. Vera of the Sithari, a species known for keeping records no one else dared to preserve. She closed the door behind her. Captain Ward, she said softly, her voice like water over stone. The Council believes your defiance is dangerous. I believe it is necessary. He raised an eyebrow. Strange thing for a counselor to say to a man waiting for a sentence. Strange only because you do not know our history, she replied. Vera stepped closer, lowering her voice even though they were alone. Long before humans came to the stars, there were others like you, species that would not kneel, that refused to join the Council's chain of obedience. They were removed. Removed, Elias repeated flatly, as in wiped out. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. Records of their existence were erased, their homeworlds stripped from maps. The official history says they never existed, but my people keep what the Council tries to bury. She reached into her robes and withdrew a small crystal slate. The surface glimmered as she touched it, and an image appeared, a blue-green planet, its continents bright under sunlight. This was the world of the Vishai, Vera said, a people fierce and free. They refused the Council's demands. They believed independence was worth dying for. She tapped the slate and the image shifted to show the planet engulfed in fire. And so, the Council made sure they did. Elias studied the image, his jaw tightening. You're saying that's what's coming for Earth. Unless you make them believe the cost is too high, she said. Vera slid the slate away. Your words are already spreading. The riots on Vareth, the uprisings on Drevery Moons, they began the moment you said them. The Council fears you more than they admit. Before Elias could respond, she stepped back. I cannot save you directly, but someone will try. When the time comes, use that device. She glanced toward his hands, somehow knowing about the metal piece, and then turned to leave. The door closed behind her, and the silence returned. But now, it was a different kind of silence. Elias leaned back against the wall, eyes narrowing. The Council had erased entire civilizations to keep their order. Earth was next on their list. Unless he could make sure that his so-called insult became something they couldn't erase, not a crime, but a rallying cry. And somewhere in the depths of the city beyond these walls, someone was already setting that plan in motion. The cell walls trembled first. A faint, almost unnoticeable shiver, like the deep growl of some distant beast. Elias opened his eyes. He'd been resting with his back against the cold bench, the small metal device still hidden in his palm. This was no natural quake. Then came the sound, a low, rolling thunder that seemed to press down from above, vibrating through the floor. It was followed by a ripple of commotion outside his cell. Hurried footsteps, muffled voices, the hiss of doors opening and closing far too quickly. The door slid open. 2 guards stepped in, weapons drawn, their helmet lights flickering in quick pulses. Move, one ordered. There was a sharpness to his voice that hadn't been there before. As they escorted him through the corridor, Elias caught snatches of conversation from passing staff and soldiers. Warships, hundreds. Above the capital, no attack yet. The humans. They emerged into a side balcony of the Council Tower, and the sight hit him like a punch. The sky was alive with ships. Enormous vessels hung in the upper atmosphere, their dark hulls outlined by the planet's twin suns. Each one bore the deep blue markings of the United Earth Fleet. Smaller escort craft drifted in perfect formation, their engines glowing like embers in the haze, but they weren't firing. They weren't even moving aggressively. They simply hung there, silent, waiting, their presence alone enough to send panic through the city. Down below, the capital's streets boiled with chaos. Alien citizens flooded the plazas, pointing skyward, shouting in dozens of languages. Sirens wailed from the defense districts, but the great planetary cannons remained cold. No one wanted to be the first to fire. A council aide rushed past the balcony, speaking rapidly into a comlink. Earth says they are here to retrieve their people. They say they will leave peacefully if Captain Ward is released. The guards stiffened at this. one glancing toward Elias with something almost like fear. Above, one of the massive Earth ships adjusted its orbit, the shift so precise it looked choreographed. The sun caught on its armor, sending a brief, blinding flash across the city. It was a silent message to everyone watching: "We are here, and we are not afraid of you." Inside the council chamber, chaos matched the streets. Delegates shouted over one another. Some demanded the immediate destruction of the human fleet. Others argued that a battle here, on the council's own world, would shatter the image of control they'd built for centuries. And somewhere in the noise, the iron-scaled reptilian delegate, the one who had slipped Elias the device, stood and spoke just loudly enough for nearby translators to catch. "This is not an invasion," he said. "It is a reminder. The humans do not kneel, and perhaps neither should we." In that moment, Elias realized the fleet above wasn't just for him. It was a signal, a spark thrown into a room filled with dry powder, and the council was about to decide whether to smother it or watch it burn. The council chamber was no longer the cold, ordered hall Elias had first stepped into. It had become a storm. Delegates shouted over one another, translator drones whirring frantically as they struggled to keep up. The glowing banners of each species flickered like restless flames against the high pearl walls. The judge's crystalline hands struck the air with the gavel sphere, sending waves of resonant hum through the chamber. "Order!" his voice boomed, but the word had lost its weight. The tension was too thick. High above the city, the Earth fleet hung in place, every ship visible through the chamber's wide, curved windows. The sight was a constant pressure on the council, a silent reminder that the humans would not vanish quietly into the night. "We cannot allow this," roared the Jathari delegate, his jeweled exoskeleton catching the light. "If we do not crush them now, they will inspire rebellion across the rim worlds." A slender being from the Sithari stood in response, her pale gold skin glowing faintly. "Or perhaps that is what frightens you, not rebellion, but the truth they carry." Each statement sent ripples through the crowd. Some nodded grimly, others hissed in outrage. Finally, the judge raised both arms. "We will vote." The process was ancient. Each delegate's vote was cast through a pulse of energy directed into the great core, a floating sphere in the center of the chamber that absorbed their decisions, blue for clemency, red for destruction. One by one, delegates stepped forward. Some sent their energy without hesitation, their colors burning bright and angry. Others moved slowly, eyes shifting toward Elias before making their choice. The core began to swirl with streaks of red and blue, each one twisting around the other like dueling flames. In the upper gallery, Elias spotted familiar faces: the iron-scaled reptilian, the Sithari counselor Vera, even the Torvax giant who had warned against martyrdom. Their turns came, and each time the core glowed a deep, steady blue. Then came the Empire Loyalists, species that had long ruled the council's corridors. Their votes flared blood red, one after another, until the colors in the core were near, lie even. A low murmur spread as the tally approached the final counts. The chamber's tension was almost unbearable. When the last delegate cast their vote, the core spun violently, the red and blue colliding in a blinding whirl, then froze, half blue, half red, a tie. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Only the hum of the core remained, a deep, resonant throb like a heartbeat. Every eye turned to the judge. By law older than most of the worlds in this chamber, the tie-breaking vote belonged to him alone. He stood slowly, the light within his crystalline body shifting from pale silver to a deep, unreadable shade. "The council has spoken," he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner. "And so, now I must speak as well." The chamber waited breathless, knowing that the next words would decide the fate of Earth, and perhaps the order of the entire galaxy. The judge's deep, resonant voice rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. The swirling blue and red within the voting core reflected across his crystalline form, each flicker of light catching in his faceted skin. For a long moment he didn't speak, and the silence became so thick it felt like the whole galaxy was holding its breath. Finally, he stepped down from the high pedestal, each movement deliberate. Captain Elias Ward of Earth, he began, his voice low but carrying the weight of centuries. You have spoken words the Council finds dangerous, words that threaten the balance we have built for generations. The red faction in the chamber shifted forward in anticipation. The blue faction stood still, watching. The judge's head tilted slightly, and the light within him flared. Not crimson, but a clear, piercing white. But, he continued, you have also spoken words that cannot be erased. Words that remind us all that the Council exists because free worlds agreed to stand together, because they were forced to kneel. A sharp murmur ran through the chamber. Elias didn't move, didn't speak, but inside something tightened. The faintest coil of hope. Therefore, the judge said, raising a crystalline hand, this Council will not execute you. You are free to return to your people, but let all species hear this. Earth will never kneel, and neither will any world that chooses its own path. The red faction erupted in protest, voices sharp and furious, but their shouts were drowned out by the sound from the viewing galleries. Cheers, clicks, howls, and strange alien songs bursting forth from the throats of those who had never dared raise them in this chamber before. Above the city, the Earth fleet shifted in perfect unison, breaking their silent vigil with a slow, deliberate turn toward open space. The gesture was unmistakable. We came for our own, and we will always come for our own. As Elias walked out of the council hall, the chains gone from his wrists, he saw them, citizens of a dozen worlds gathered in the plaza, their banners hastily painted with the same 7 words he had spoken weeks before. We will never kneel to anyone. It had spread faster than he could have imagined. Hollow screens across the plaza replayed his trial, his calm defiance, the judge's final words. In back alleys and quiet corners, small groups of aliens leaned together, whispering of independence. In the weeks that followed, the phrase appeared everywhere, etched into metal walls on mining moons, broadcast in coded messages through rebel networks, painted in bright letters across the sides of cargo freighters. Some called it an insult, others called it a promise. To Elias Ward, it was neither. It was a truth. Standing aboard the command deck of the flagship Resolute, he looked out at the starfield beyond. Somewhere out there, he knew the Council was already planning its next move, but so were the countless worlds that had heard his words and realized they did not have to bow. Set course for home, he told his crew. We've got a lot of work to do. And as the Resolute's engines lit the darkness, the galaxy felt different, as if a single spark of defiance had become a fire no one could put out, because the insult that had nearly condemned him had just become a legend.